Okay, so in this video, we want to go through the process of creating a Kubernetes cluster on the IBM Cloud. In a previous video, you might have saw how we created a VPC and created some subnets across all availability zones. We're going to use that VPC today to deploy that Kubernetes cluster. So let's get started. As you can see on my screen here, we've got the dashboard that I just logged into my IBM Cloud account. So to get started on creating a Kubernetes cluster, we can easily just go over to the menu, go over to containers, and down to clusters. Now this is going to give us an option for deploying both OpenShift clusters as well as Kubernetes clusters. Today we're just going to go through the Kubernetes process. They're essentially the same. As you can see here, I've got one cluster. It is an OpenShift cluster. So let's go create a Kubernetes cluster. Click on Create Cluster. It gives us the option here, like I stated, OpenShift or Kubernetes. We're just going to go base Kubernetes. And it gives us the option if we want to deploy into classic infrastructure of the IBM Cloud or within the VPC. Since we did create that VPC, we want to go ahead and leverage that. So the next option that we see here is which VPC we actually want to deploy into. So I'm going to deploy into that demo south that we created previously in that Dallas region. The next option that you have is depending on how much availability you need across that region for your deployment of that Kubernetes cluster. If I wanted to just limit it to just spinning up a cluster across 2 different zones or even one zone, I could just select the one subnet that I want it to be deployed into. In this scenario, we're going to go ahead and do all 3. And this is the subnet that we want to use. In the subnet that we created, we only created, or actually the VPC that we created, I only created one subnet for each zone. You can build additional subnets within a single zone if you wanted to. In our scenario, we only did one, so it defaulted to the ones that we had created. Now we can go and select our Kubernetes version. We have the capability of going from the current Kubernetes version and then also selecting back a couple versions if we needed to deploy an older cluster in case we were like creating a cluster to replicate from another cluster, or in a scenario where we needed to rebuild an existing cluster. Maybe you're running 1.3.0 on premise and you wanted to move to cloud, but you wanted to stay with that Kubernetes version. You could select that and migrate in, and then from there do your upgrades a little bit later. So we'll go ahead and select the latest with the 1.3.2. Then we'll create a default worker pool. You can name this. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it default. And that's going to create a worker pool across all 3 zones. Currently, it's showing that I want to deploy 3 of these workers per zone. I actually don't. I'm going to scale that down to just 2. And then it's also showing this BX2 4x16 profile. We can go in and select the change flavor. So IBM Cloud's got plenty of different profiles that you could select from. Even if you wanted some GPUs, you've got GPU capability. If you needed something a little more RAM intensive, you've got those profiles that you could utilize as well. In our scenario, we're just going to stick with the small 4x16 instance that was pre-selected. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of this. And then the next thing we're going to look at is our worker pool encryption. If you do have a key management service already in your account and you wanted to leverage that for encrypting your worker pools, you could have that tied to this cluster during provisioning. In this scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off. We don't need it for this demo. The next option is how we want to make this cluster available. If we only want it to be accessible within the VPC itself, we could select it as the private endpoint only, or we could leave it to where it can be accessible from the private and public. We're going to go ahead and select private and public endpoints for this scenario. Outbound traffic protection, this is by default turning off the capability of your cluster to be able to communicate outbound. This is turned on by default. In our scenario, I do actually want these worker nodes to be able to communicate outbound. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. But there is very good options when you don't necessarily need that, and maybe you want everything going through within your VPC, or even through like a direct link or something that's connected within your environment. So I'm going to go ahead and disable that for our scenario. Then for any of your like secrets and things that you might deploy into your cluster, if you have again another key management service, we could leverage that to then encrypt your secrets in the cluster. I am going to go ahead and select that off as well. And then secrets management. So for those secrets, do we want to utilize secrets service? So in the IBM Cloud, we have the IBM Cloud Secrets Manager service that could be leveraged for not only your secrets within the cluster itself, but also any of your subdomain certificates that you could bring in. You could utilize the secrets management to store that information. We're not going to do that for this scenario, so I'm going to go ahead and check that off as well. The next thing we can do is select, give the cluster a name. So I'm just going to give it a simple name of AIKS demo. And then we can go in and select the resource group that we might want it to be deployed into. And that's essentially all that we need to do to get the Kubernetes cluster started. I do want to talk about some of the integrations that we can apply right now. As it gets provisioned, it'll also tie in automatically, since this account has activity tracking enabled. Any process that's happening within this cluster is going to get tracked. So the events of me creating this cluster is actually going to get tracked at the account level. And then any modifications that might happen to the cluster as well will get tracked by any user that comes in and does those activities. So that's always a nice thing to have. And then we're also going to tie this instance to our logging service. So in here we can go and select an existing service. We're going to keep that checked on. And then monitoring, we also want to have the monitoring service tied to this cluster as well. We don't need workload protection, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And then we'll just leave the default monitoring instance that's in this account turned on for that scenario. So now this is scrolling back up. I just want to validate we've got 2 worker nodes per zone. We're going to deploy into all 3 zones. So that's going to give us a total of 6 worker nodes of the 4x16 flavor. Let's get started. So I'm just going to go over here and click create. And that's going to go off and start provisioning our Kubernetes cluster. Now this does take a little bit of time, maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So we're just going to kind of wait for that process to go. Let's see here if it at least gets us over to our validation screen. So now the Kubernetes cluster is getting started and running. So we can see here it's got 6 of 6 pending, and it's just going to go through the process of deploying this cluster into our VPC. We can click over to worker nodes, so it shows all 6 provisioning pending. The worker pool, you can see we've got 2 workers per zone, so it kind of gives us an insight into what that worker pool is. It's the 4x16s. So we're just going to kind of let this go off and do its thing, and we'll check back in a little bit later. Okay, so checking back in on the cluster, it looks like everything is healthy now. So we've got 6 worker nodes making up this Kubernetes cluster. The ingress status is healthy. So now we should be able to log into the Kubernetes dashboard. As you can see also down here, we've got our networking, we've got our public and private enabled. If we didn't want that public enabled any longer, we could easily just toggle it off. And then it looks like our integrations of logging and monitoring have already been applied as well. Some of the other add-ons that we could add, so by default, it goes ahead and creates the block storage for the VPC that we created to be enabled within the cluster. So it creates those storage classes that can be utilized by your applications with block storage. And then we've got our storage operator as well. In addition, we could also do file storage by just clicking install here. It'll select which version we want. We'll just go with the default, the latest, and do install. So what that's going to do is it's going to go and enable this cluster to also utilize file storage. So it'll create those storage classes as well. So let's go back up here. We can see, all the worker nodes. They all look healthy. Got our private IPs. These are the IPs from within our VPC. So you can see there's no public IPs attached, just that ingress controller has the capability of having that public access enabled. And then the worker pool, we just had that single worker. Let's go back to overview. And then up here, you can see Kubernetes dashboard. Clicking this is going to automatically log us in utilizing our IBM Cloud account. It's going to use our IAM policies to then spin up the dashboard for logging us into the Kubernetes cluster. So here we are. We've got the Kubernetes cluster. We can go over to all namespaces, and you can see all the different deployments and pods that are running, and everything looks healthy. We can go down to nodes, and we can see our utilization. Here, all of our worker nodes making up the Kubernetes cluster itself. One thing that we had just talked about was the storage classes. So you can see here, got made up of a bunch of different storage classes by default, enabled. So when you deploy an application, you can select one of these different storage classes, and this will go and provision the persistent storage on the VPC block that you need. Or you can also see now, since we did apply that add-on, it's already picked up that we also can enable file storage classes as well. So there's a bunch of different ones that you can select from, different IOP tiers, and then also between the file. Let's see, what else? Anything? So we've got our ingress here. That's all healthy. I think that's about it for looking at this right now. So let's just jump back over to the IBM Cloud portal, close this out, and then look at some of those integrations, right? So again, we've got our integrations for logging and monitoring. You can see it's already tied to this cluster. And then to be able to look into the logs for this cluster, all you need to do is click launch. You're going to use those IAM policies that'll automatically log you in to the logging instance for your account that you have set up tied to this this cluster. Looks like there was a lot of initial errors that might have popped up initially. But we can go in and start doing some of the filtering and like looking through within the cluster itself. We don't have any of our own applications deployed or anything, so there's no specific logs that we want to look at. But maybe in a future video we'll do some deployments and we can start playing around with some of the actual logs within that, as well as monitoring. Same scenario. The monitoring, all you got to do is click launch, and it'll automatically log you into the IBM Cloud monitoring. There's default dashboards as well as additional ones that you can go and filter through. So if you wanted to look at the container, CPU, and memory limits, this would show all the deployments within it. And then you can go and filter down to your application if you needed to look at some of that. But again, we'll probably cover another video going a deeper dive into the logging and monitoring of the IBM services. So I think that's it for now on the Kubernetes install. I guess one other thing that we could really look at is one, tearing this down, but also in the future. So we did talk about the versions before. Kubernetes, comes out with new versions pretty often, and we don't want this cluster to kind of go out of support by falling too far back. So as we get notifications that there's a new version, you have full capability of deploying the new version, or actually upgrading to a newer version automatically. It's under your control. All you have to do is go and select which nodes that you would want to upgrade to the next version. So it'll go through and do like a rolling process, or you can set it, on your own to only upgrade a couple worker nodes at a time, go and update them, then come back and select to update those as well. So this gives you the capability of, updating the workers up to the next version of Kubernetes. It'll go and update the master nodes initially, which are all fully under control by IBM, to the latest version, and then that would give you the capability of updating to the next version within your worker nodes. And again, that happens on under your control, so you can set up a window if you needed to, or if you just did a rolling process, your application should still always just stay up and running. Okay, that'll be it. Thank you.